America's on fire, literally and figuratively. And today, we're diving into the latest episode of Progressive Priorities Gone Wild. California, that shining beacon of performative politics and fiscal irresponsibility, is burning to the ground as we speak. Homes are turning to ash, firefighters are scrambling for actual water, and politicians, well, they're too busy reading URL off of teleprompters and flying off on taxpayer-funded jaunts to even pretend they care. Spoiler alert! It's a disaster. And this isn't just a news story for me. It's personal. I live in Los Angeles. My business is on the very edge of a brand new evacuation zone with a Sunset Fire in Runyon Canyon just a short walk from my office. I spent years living in that specific area, and seeing it go up in flames is gut-wrenching. For you to have an idea, just down the block from my office is an LAFD station, and I can't overstate how much respect I have for those guys. In fact, I'm wearing their shirt right now because they deserve every ounce of gratitude and recognition for what they're doing, especially when you consider how our so-called political leaders have systemically gutted their resources and cut their legs out from under them. As we'll see in a moment, from our mayor, Karen Bass, to Biden, the endless blunders and lack of thoughtful policymaking have once again become the hallmark of weak Democrat leadership. Welcome to California, where the only thing spreading faster than the flames is the incompetence. Let's break it all down. LA is currently facing 5 major fires. The Pacific Palisades fire, the most destructive wildfire in the city's modern history, erupted on Tuesday, January 7th, 2025 at approximately 10:30 a.m. Fueled by hurricane-force Santa Ana winds, this fire alone has already consumed 42 square miles, an area nearly equivalent to the size of San Francisco, and destroyed over 1,000 structures, primarily homes and businesses, across the Pacific Palisades and neighboring communities. Over 130,000 people are currently under evacuation orders, and tens of thousands of households are currently without power. Now, the financial impact is staggering. According to preliminary reports from the Los Angeles County Fire Department and data from the California Office of Emergency Services, early estimates place the damage from the Palisades fire alone at over $3 billion, encompassing lost homes, infrastructure, and businesses. Among the destroyed locations, AP News confirms key parts of Pacific Palisades Village have been obliterated, including grocery stores, banks, public libraries, and several schools. Sections of Interstate 10 and the Pacific Coast Highway remain closed to aid evacuation and firefighting efforts, according to the California Department of Transportation. Meanwhile, power outages caused by the winds and preemptive safety shutoffs have left an additional 1.5 million utility customers at risk, as reported by Southern California Edison. And by the way, that picture is real. Imagine that in your backyard. This map shows the fires affecting Los Angeles as of the making of this video. As you can see, while the Palisades fire is massive and devastating, it's far from the only blaze tearing through our city. According to the Los Angeles County Fire Department, 3 other major wildfires are currently burning across Los Angeles County, including the Eaton Fire in Altadena and the Sunset Fire near the Hollywood Hills. The Eaton Fire has scorched over 200 acres in Pasadena, with between 200 and 500 structures either damaged or completely destroyed, as reported by the Angeles National Forest Service. Combined, these fires have displaced more than 100,000 residents and severely disrupted critical infrastructure, including water systems and schools, according to the California Office of Emergency Services. Additionally, the Sunset Fire has moved dangerously close to landmarks like the Hollywood Bowl, with local fire officials stating that erratic winds have made containment efforts an uphill battle. Now, the winds have reached speeds of up to 100 miles per hour, carrying embers miles ahead of the fire fronts and making containment nearly impossible. Firefighters have labeled the conditions unprecedented, with hydrants running dry in several neighborhoods due to strained water systems. As of now, containment across all fires remains at 0%, with worsening winds predicted throughout the week. The total burned area across these fires is approaching 50 square miles. Which brings us to Gavin Newsom, who can be seen here trying his best to not look like a sociopathic Bond villain, staring ominously into the flames. Fitting, considering the inferno behind him is partly fueled by his policies. Now, there's a lot to be said about how our leadership in Los Angeles and California has created the perfect storm for this disaster to escalate into an even greater catastrophe, but we'll get to that in a minute. First, I want to paint a picture so you can truly understand what's happening across our beautiful city and what it feels like to be on the ground right now.
And as Samantha Cortese has said, this is one of those dire, panic-stricken situations That's because look at this. The fire's right up on the hill. It is moving past. I can feel it's so close. We're going to be safe, but there's flying embers, there's ash. I can hear it moving down the hill, Palisades Drive, as folks, whoa, we got to step back. We're feeling that warmth from the fire. Okay, so what you're seeing, Armando, be careful. So these cars, as you see here, they're abandoned. Look at that. The fire's coming up. We're going to move back. Nobody is in their vehicles. People are ditching their cars here on Palisades Drive and Sunset because they couldn't get down to BCH. Okay, we're going to have to be careful because this fire is moving very quickly. We're going to try to move back. We're
going to let you go.
We're going to get out of here.
I think you guys are in a situation where, like, yeah.
We gotta go.
This was one of the more surreal scenes to unfold during the Palisades fire. In a city already infamous for its traffic, we've somehow managed to make gridlock even worse by turning evacuation routes into makeshift parking lots. Panicked residents fleeing for their lives abandoned their vehicles smack in the middle of the road, creating a wall of vehicles that blocked emergency responders from getting through. Classic LA, right? Even in a crisis, the car culture shines through. So how did the city resolve this chaos, you ask? Well, with a bulldozer, of course. Yep, the fire crews literally had to plow cars off the road to keep a clear path for emergency vehicles. Meanwhile, actor Steve Guttenberg, who somehow became the voice of reason in this chaos, had to remind people this is not a parking lot. He urged evacuees to leave their keys behind so their vehicles could be moved without a bulldozer. It's absurd, it's tragic, and it's just one more way this fire is exposing the cracks in how we manage crisis in Los Angeles. Oops, did I say manage? I meant to say mismanage. Say it with me. Mismanage. Here's how.
Well, listen, it's a disaster to the 100th degree. It's beyond anything I think any of us could have ever imagined. But my heart goes out, obviously, to the people with their homes, and I'm watching the small businesses around us go up in flames. This is people's livelihoods, so it's devastating. But what is most concerning to me is our first responders and our firefighters who are trying to battle this. There's no water in the Palisades. There's no water coming out of the fire hydrants. This is an absolute mismanagement by the city. Not the firefighters' fault, but it's by the city.
That was former mayoral candidate Rick Caruso, who didn't hold back, and honestly, can you blame him? He revealed that Los Angeles failed to fill its water reservoirs, leaving fire hydrants dry in the middle of a raging wildfire. Let that sink in. Firefighters who are out there risking their lives are showing up to hydrants that don't work because the city didn't plan ahead. Meanwhile, people are fleeing for their lives, watching their homes and businesses burn to the ground, completely powerless to stop it. So let me just say this outright. This is incompetence at the highest level. Caruso's revelation highlights how leadership failures have made a bad situation far worse. This isn't just about the chaos of a wildfire. It's about years of neglect and poor decision-making that set the stage for this disaster. The hydrants running dry, that's not an accident. It's the inevitable result of a city more focused on optics and bureaucracy than basic preparedness. We'll break down exactly how this crisis came to be and why this failure is a glaring indictment of the people running Los Angeles in a minute. But first, let's see how things are going over on the other fire happening here in Los Angeles that is equally big and fast moving, the Eaton fire.
When did you get the notification for an evacuation?
We never did. Over here, never got the evacuation notice. Even when we got here, it was not there.
And have you seen any fire crews here? I see an engine company down there.
Yeah, we see them going up and down the street, but not helping us.
Right. Well, there simply aren't enough around. Listen, your name is?
James.
Last name is?
Day.
D-A-Y?
D-A-Y.
Good luck to you, James.
Thank you.
So there you have it. I mean, this is hand-to-hand combat, quite frankly. This isn't to put any kind of blame anywhere because there are so many fires and intersections like this. There's another explosion. Goodness knows what that was.
Well, while that reporter hesitates to place blame, I've got no problem doing it. This isn't just a natural disaster. It's a catastrophic failure of leadership from our local Democrats, who hold a majority in nearly every aspect of our government here in California. The blame starts with Karen Bass and goes all the way up to Gavin Newsom. Take people like James Day, for instance. He never even received an evacuation notice. Think about that. Lives are on the line, homes are burning, and residents are left completely in the dark about whether they need to flee. And when they finally seek help, they're met with a system stretched so thin it can barely respond. Now, credit always goes to the fire crews. They're doing everything they can, but they simply aren't enough. Why? Because instead of prioritizing emergency preparedness, like funding fire departments and maintaining critical infrastructure, our leadership has spent years redirecting resources into pet projects and performative politics. So while this reporter talks about hand-to-hand combat, let's be clear about the real fight here. It's against the incompetence and misplaced priorities of those who've led us to this point. Oh, and by the way, that explosion you just heard, that's the sound of their policies failing in real time. And as the sun rose over Los Angeles after the first night of fires, it revealed a devastating scene. Major parts of Pacific Palisades had been completely wiped off the map. Entire neighborhoods, homes, and businesses reduced to ash. It's not just heartbreaking, it's infuriating. And even as of the making of this video, the fire remains 0% contained, and this level of destruction didn't need to happen. This isn't just a wildfire, it's a culmination of years of neglect, mismanagement, and misplaced priorities by our so-called Democrat leadership. When resources are cut, water systems are ignored, and emergency preparedness is an afterthought, this is the result. Lives destroyed, neighborhoods, communities gone. The flames may be the immediate enemy, but the underlying problem is the failure of those who are supposed to protect this city, who we voted into office and gave the responsibility to be there and prevent things like this. We're witnessing the costs of their incompetence in real time. These crooked politicians have allowed huge parts of our beautiful city, like for example, this is Malibu, postcard Malibu, to become indistinguishable from a Ukrainian war zone. Ashes, destruction, and despair as far as the eye can see. Meanwhile, Biden has been sending billions nonstop to the Ukraine to fund their war. And yet, we've heard nothing about a dollar amount for the fires devastating California. Is our state going to get the same lackluster treatment Florida and the Carolinas got when they were hammered by hurricanes, left waiting for meaningful federal aid? I sure hope not, because based on the priorities of this administration, I'm not really holding my breath. Now, we've been talking a lot about how the blame for this disaster falls squarely on our local leadership. So let's start taking a look at some of the characters involved in this debacle, starting with our local fire chief. Meet Los Angeles Fire Chief Kristen Crowley, who seems to have her priorities completely backwards. She proudly touts her status as the first female and LGBTQ fire chief in the LA Fire Department, and her self-declared focus is promoting a culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, while DEI might sound good on paper, it's hard to celebrate those initiatives when firefighters are battling infernos with dry hydrants and insufficient resources. This isn't about identity, it's about competence. And right now, the department needs leaders who are focused on keeping the city from burning to the ground, not building their PR portfolios.
I'm super inspired.
She took time out of her already busy schedule to tell us about her vision for the department's future, one that includes a 3-year strategic plan to increase diversity.
People ask me, well, what number are you looking for? I said, I'm not looking for a number. It's never enough.
Out of 3,300 city firefighters, only 115 are women right now. She's already looking at ways to change that. She's quick to point out that doing so has a greater purpose, attracting the best and brightest for the job.
They feel included, they feel valued, and they feel part of a cohesive team.
The chief also checks another box when it comes to inclusivity and diversity at this department. She's a proud member of the LGBTQ community.
That just kind of opens the door of people that thought, wow, I didn't even know that was an opportunity for me.
I'm going to try to say this as nicely as I can. Who gives a fuck who you fuck, dude? You were literally hired to put out fires, not to have sex on camera. Please. If anything, our fire chief's words have aged spectacularly. Like milk left out in the scorching heat of the fires her department can't seem to control. In this interview, she passionately laid out her vision for the department. A 3-year strategic plan to increase diversity. Not to save lives more efficiently, not to prevent catastrophic disasters, just to tick some identity boxes. When asked for a target number, she proudly declared, I'm not going to give you a number. It's never enough. Well, Chief, how's that working out for you? Now, out of the 3,100 city firefighters, just 115 are women, and she's laser focused on changing that. Why? To attract the best and brightest, because apparently competence and readiness aren't enough. You also have to feel included. Meanwhile, hydrants are running dry, firefighters are stretched dangerously thin, and Los Angeles is literally burning to the ground as I speak. I just heard that there's another fire that started near my home. But hey, at least the chief is opening doors by being a proud LGBTQ trailblazer or whatever it is. Maybe the next Raging Inferno will take a break and applaud her for inclusivity points. Because clearly, for our fire chief, Crowley, checking boxes matters more than the lives of Angelenos. And now we turn to who I believe is the biggest culprit in this entire debacle, aside from nature itself. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, who can be seen here visibly annoyed after encountering someone who dared to not use they, them pronouns. Now, why is Karen the biggest culprit, you ask? Well, I'm so glad you asked. Before these wildfires even started, Bass made sure the fire department was set up to fail by slashing its budget by $17.6 million. Why? To redirect funds to a bloated homelessness program where nearly half the allocated money went unused, according to the city comptroller. And by the way, folks, should mention that California, as a state, has spent over $25 billion to solve homelessness in the last 5 years. So just keep shoveling more money at it and have it disappear. And by the way, that wasn't even enough for Bass. Apparently, she originally aimed to cut $23 million from the fire department. Meanwhile, she threw $1.3 billion at homelessness programs, nearly double what was given to the fire department, because apparently keeping the city from literally burning down wasn't a priority. I mean, imagine being elected the mayor of the city that's always on fire and thinking, you know what would be a great idea? Cutting the fire department's budget of the city that's always on fire. Brilliant, right? Now, to make matters worse, as firefighters desperately called for off-duty personnel to help battle 3 raging wildfires, where was our retarded Chief Bass? 7,400 miles away in Ghana, partying at the inauguration of a foreign president. Her absence was as glaring as the bone-dry fire hydrants in Los Angeles, leaving first responders scrambling with nowhere near the resources they needed. Rick Caruso, the guy she beat in the 2022 mayoral race, hit the nail on the head when he said, it's all about leadership management that we're seeing a failure of, and all these residents are paying the ultimate price for that. And he's not wrong. Bass's priorities, gutting essential services to fund performative programs, have left Los Angeles literally in ashes. While residents are losing everything and firefighters are fighting a losing battle, she was halfway across the world on a taxpayer-funded vacation. If this isn't the textbook definition of failed leadership, I don't know what is. Oh, and would you believe me when I told you that it actually gets worse? Because it does. And the only reason why I smile when I say this is because I like to laugh through my pain.
And where did they allocate that $17 million towards? Yep, $22 million was allocated to fund supportive services, housing, and other resources for illegal immigrant families who recently arrived in the city. Shout out to you, Mayor Karen Bass. You know how you keep hearing this thing that we should probably prioritize America first before we spend money on, I don't know, things like 16 different fire departments in Ukraine, making sure that they have protective gear, motor pumps, chainsaws, all this various things. See, Ukrainian fire departments are thoroughly prepared for any emergency thanks to American funding.
Let's break this down because it's nothing short of objectively evil. According to a city comptroller report and FEMA funding allocations, Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass gutted the fire department's budget, money that should have gone toward protecting American citizens, and instead redirected $22 million towards supportive services, housing, and resources for migrant families who recently arrived in Los Angeles. While these programs describe the beneficiaries as only migrant families, Los Angeles' long-standing sanctuary city policies, according to city council records and past initiatives, suggest that many of these individuals could include those without legal immigration status. Let that sink in. Americans are losing their homes, businesses, and in some cases their lives, while Bass channels taxpayer dollars to people who may not even be here legally. If that doesn't infuriate you, I don't know what will. Now, this isn't a one-off bad decision. It's part of a pattern. Karen Bass has spent her entire career advocating policies rooted in Marxist ideologies, as evidenced by her past affiliations with groups like the Venceremos Brigade and her public statements championing wealth redistribution and systemic restructuring, according to investigative reports and archival speeches. Her focus consistently prioritizes non-citizens and social experiments over the needs of American citizens, as highlighted by her redirection of critical funding for essential services like the fire department to programs aiding migrant populations who are here likely illegally. It's evident that her track record shows she has little to no interest in preserving the foundational values of this country. In fact, her policies often work to unravel them. And what about the glaring irony here? While American taxpayers are funding fire departments in Ukraine, ensuring they're equipped with protective gear, motor pumps, and chainsaws, according to federal aid reports from the Department of State and USAID, Los Angeles is burning to the ground due to Karen Bass's negligence. FEMA and USAID programs have provided millions in funding to Ukraine for emergency services, while here at home, Los Angeles' fire department has been gutted by budget cuts, as noted in city budget records and comptroller reports. We've prioritized preparing a foreign government's emergency services while leaving one of our nation's most iconic cities to fend for itself. It's as if our leaders are more concerned with looking good on the world stage than actually safeguarding the citizens they were elected to serve. This isn't just hypocrisy. It's a slap in the face to every Angeleno watching their home and community go up in flames. We're literally preparing others to fight fires while creating the conditions for our own cities to burn down. If that's not the ultimate metaphor for America last, then I don't know what is. Oh, and remember when I said it gets worse? It sure does. Again, smiling to laugh through the pain. Because a memo LAFD lesbian-in-chief Kristen Crowley sent just a few weeks ago revealed the dire consequences of nearly $18 million in budget cuts approved by Mayor Karen Bass. The memo stated that the reductions has severely limited the department's capacity to prepare for, train for, and respond to large-scale emergencies, including wildfires. Oh wow, this sounds so familiar. Basically what's happening now. According to NBC Los Angeles, the cuts left approximately $7 million stripped from the fire department's overtime budget, impacting critical functions like training, fire prevention, and disaster response preparedness. Not like we really need that anyway, right? Anyway, Crowley's memo also highlighted how these cuts jeopardize the department's aerial firefighting capabilities, including water-dropping helicopters, and weakened the disaster response section, which funds bulldozer teams essential for controlling wildfires. The reductions, Crowley warned, threatened the department's ability to meet mutual aid agreements and respond quickly to woodland fires. Despite these grave warnings, the cuts went through, leaving the LAFD scrambling to manage the ongoing 15,000-acre Palisades fire and other emergencies across the county. Bass's insistence that these cuts didn't affect the current wildfire response is directly contradicted by the department's own internal communications, making her leadership choices even harder to justify as our city burns. Now look, you guys know me. I love making jokes about our retard-in-chief, Karen Bass, but look, I'm all for giving people the opportunity to explain themselves, and I'm sure she has a very reasonable explanation for why she made the choices she made, which inevitably amplify this crisis, so let's hear her out.
Do you owe citizens an apology for being absent while their homes were burning? Do you regret cutting the fire department budget by millions of dollars, Madam Mayor? Have you nothing to say today? Can you back up? Appreciate it. Have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today? Elon Musk says that you're utterly incompetent. Are you considering your position? Madam Mayor, have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today who are dealing with this disaster? No apology for them? Do you think you should have been visiting Ghana while this was unfolding back home? Madam Mayor, let me ask you just again, have you anything to say to the citizens today as you return?
No. They're gonna come. Ma'am, hold on 1 second.
Madam Mayor, just a few words for the citizens today as you return to deal with the catastrophe.
Can you take this down?
Karen Bass, everyone. The stone-faced mayor who thought a taxpayer-funded trip to Ghana was more important than staying in Los Angeles while our beautiful city literally burned to the ground. Confronted by reporters asking if she owed residents an apology for being MIA during the fires and for slashing the fire department's budget by $17.6 million, she did what any great leader would do. Absolutely nothing. No answers, no apologies, just a blank stare and a brisk walk up the ramp like she was auditioning for the silent film era Redux. This is the same Karen Bass who prioritized celebrating a foreign president's inauguration over leading her own city through its worst fire in history. Maybe she thought the flames would just politely extinguish themselves while she was gone. Or maybe she was too busy calculating how much more she could gut the fire department next year, since she didn't quite hit her $20 million goal. Either way, the message was loud and clear. Los Angeles doesn't come first. Not for Karen Bass. And as for the thousands of acres burning, the homes lost, and the exhausted firefighters battling with inadequate resources, Bass couldn't even muster the decency to fake a response. No acknowledgement of her absence, no explanation for her disastrous budget cuts, just silence. If leadership is measured by how one shows up in a crisis, Karen Bass is running on empty, and so are the hydrants in Los Angeles. But look, again, I'll give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was caught with her pants down. Maybe she's the kind of person who needs her remarks written for her. Let's allow her another opportunity to explain herself.
Eric, is there any indication at this point what the mayor will say here? Has there been any press release from her staff?
Not so far. We saw some video clips where a number of reporters were able to get near the mayor as she arrived in LA, visited with the governor. We believe she toured some of the disaster sites out in the Palisades, but they were specifically not allowed to ask her any questions, and we have not gotten a preview other than a brief statement from the mayor's office that said officials will provide an update on all that's going on in the city right now.
Not allowed to ask an elected official questions about what's happening in her city. That seems a bit odd to me.
It's an unusual situation, but there are times where we are given access for what they'll call a photo spray, like a photo op, where we can shoot some video and still photographers can take some photos, but the officials who are there are not prepared or ready or don't want to answer questions. So unusual given the circumstances of the last day. No question, not unusual the rest of the time.
Classic Karen Bass, a mayor so committed to transparency that reporters weren't even allowed to ask her questions about the disaster unfolding in our great city. Instead, she offered what we in the business call a photo spray. You know, a carefully choreographed photo op where she can look concerned while saying absolutely nothing of substance, because who needs accountability when you've got Instagram-worthy disaster tour pictures? This is straight out of the Marxist playbook. Control the narrative, limit transparency, and keep the people in the dark. It's the kind of tactic tyrants love. She managed to tour the disaster sites and visit with the governor, but heaven forbid anyone actually press her on the decisions that helped lead to this mess and what decisions she has to take us out of it. Budget cuts to the fire department? Nope. Not allowed to ask. Her taxpayer-funded trip to Ghana during this crisis? Sorry. No questiones. It's almost as if Bass thinks her job is more about curating her image than addressing the concerns of her constituents. And that brief statement her office provided? Oh, the suspense. Officials will provide an update on all the things going on in the city right now. Riveting stuff. It's like saying, we'll address the issue later, sometime, maybe. I don't know. I'm not in the mood right now. If leadership is about showing up, taking responsibility and communicating, Karen Bass seems more interested in striking a pose and controlling the narrative than actually doing her job. And speaking of actors, let's move to our next culprit in this situation, Gavin Newsom, our great, and I say that very sarcastically, governor. He held a press conference with Joe Biden to discuss the fires going on here in Los Angeles, and let's just see how that went. Pretty sure it went pretty good.
Good news is, I'm a great grandfather as of today. Grandfather. Baby girl, baby boy. So I remember this
Whatever drugs Biden is on, do not give them to me, because I actually like my cognitive abilities. But all mocking aside, you got to appreciate classic Biden when you get classic Biden. Turning a California wildfire briefing into a personal milestone celebration is just... While firefighters battle raging infernos and thousands of people lose their homes, Biden decides it's the perfect moment to announce he's the great-grandfather, because nothing says leadership like making a crisis about yourself. This isn't a press briefing, it's Biden's own personal hallmark moment. January 20th couldn't come soon enough. And speaking of that, President-elect Trump has some thoughts on this situation.
California, Mr. President, during the pandemic, you often said that you didn't believe that you should bail out blue states that you believe were being mismanaged. Given your criticism of Governor Gavin Newsom, are you willing to work with him, and do you believe that federal aid should be provided to California for as long as it takes?
Well, it's very sad, because I've been trying to get Gavin Newsom to allow water to come. You'd have tremendous water up there. They send it out to the Pacific because they're trying to protect a tiny little fish, which is in other areas, by the way, called a smelt. And for the sake of a smelt, they have no water. They had no water in the fire hydrants today in Los Angeles. It was a terrible thing. And we're going to get that done. It's going to finally be done. I got it done from the federal side, and he didn't want to sign it, but it's not going to happen again like that. There's no reason. Can you imagine? You have farmers that don't have any water in California. They have plenty of water. They don't have a drought. They send it out to the Pacific.
Donald Trump's remarks about California's water mismanagement hit the nail on the head, exposing a glaring failure in leadership that has left the state unprepared for crisis. California prioritizes protecting the Delta smelt, this tiny fish native to the Sacramento San Joaquin Delta, over ensuring there's enough water for farmers, firefighters, and residents. Billions of gallons of water are diverted to the Pacific Ocean annually to preserve the smelt's habitat, according to a 2015 report from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, instead of being stored or used for practical needs. The absurdity of prioritizing a tiny little fish over people becomes even clearer when you see firefighters struggling with dry hydrants during Los Angeles' worst wildfires. Now, California's water crisis isn't about a lack of rainfall, it's about a lack of leadership. A 2022 report from the California Legislative Analyst's Office revealed that the state fails to capture most of its rainwater due to outdated infrastructure and an overemphasis on environmental regulations. Instead of upgrading water storage facilities and building reservoirs, California's leaders have allowed vital resources to flow into the ocean, leaving farmers without water for their crops and cities ill-prepared to combat wildfires. During the 15,000-acre Palisades fire, for instance, the lack of stored water severely hampered the firefighting efforts. Trump has repeatedly criticized Governor Gavin Newsom for this blatant mismanagement, and he's absolutely right. The refusal to prioritize practical solutions over ideological environmentalism has left Californians to suffer the consequences. Trump's push to address these issues at the federal level, even against state resistance, demonstrates a commitment to real solutions that California desperately needs. It's time for the state to stop sacrificing its people for performative policies and start implementing common sense water management. Now, I know you got to be wondering how Gavin responded to Trump, because here it is.
I hate to even ask this question, but the president-elect chose to attack you, blame you for this.
One can't even respond to it. I mean, it's people are literally fleeing. People have lost their lives. Kids lost their schools. Families completely torn asunder. Churches burned down. This guy wanted to politicize it. I have a lot of thoughts, and I know what I want to say. I won't. I stood next to a president of the United States of America today, and I was proud to be with Joe Biden. And he had the backs of every single person in this community. He didn't play politics, didn't try to divide any of us.
Gavin Newsom, the self-proclaimed bastion of unity, stumbling through a word salad while trying to dodge responsibility. Let's break this down. People are fleeing for their lives. Schools and churches are in ashes. Families are devastated. And instead of addressing his own failures, he's more concerned about Trump politicizing it. Newsom even admits he has a lot of thoughts, but conveniently decides not to share them. Why? Because deep down, he knows Trump's criticism hits a little too close to home for his own liking. And then there's his bizarre flex about standing next to Joe Biden, you know, the human corpse, as if that absolves him of everything. I was proud to be with Joe Biden. Oh, really? You mean the guy who hijacked a wildfire briefing to announce he's a great-grandfather? What an incredible duo of leadership. One who abandons California to burn while chasing global green brownie points, and the other who makes every disaster about himself. Now, Newsom doesn't want to play politics, huh? Please. Cutting $17.6 million from the fire department, prioritizing environmental theatrics over practical water management, and leaving firefighters with dry hydrants isn't politics, it's negligence. And the only thing Newsom's unified is the growing frustration of Californians fed up with his failed leadership.
I spoke a little bit earlier today with Lindsay Horvath, one of the board members for the LA County Supervisors, and said, how does this happen? And she said, look, we need to do changes, and we're in the midst of already talking about a different water plan for LA County, and this obviously needs to be part of what they do differently going forward.
Remember the old "This is your brain on drugs" campaign? Well, I think it's about time for a reboot. How about "This is your city and state on Democrats," complete with these devastating images. The message couldn't be clearer.
Your right is a new fire. This is the Hollywood Hills. This is the location that we were given, 2350 North Solar Drive. That's between Nichols Canyon and Runyon Canyon in the Hollywood Hills. There are a number of homes surrounding that. Chris Christie, are you available to give us some information about this?
Mark, very concerning sight here in the Hollywood Hills. We're just west of Nichols Canyon, just north of Hollywood Boulevard, where a major fire has just sparked in the last 5 minutes. We were over the Pacific Palisades. We saw the glow coming from over the hill, and just in the last couple minutes that it took us to get over here to Hollywood, this thing has exploded in size.
That is just a few blocks from my office. I often drive through Nichols Canyon, especially when I want to avoid traffic. It's a beautiful drive. Runyon Canyon, one of the most iconic hiking spots in the city. It's right there too. It's heartbreaking to see so much of the city you love being reduced to ash. Now, as we've seen, the overwhelming consensus from all sides, the firefighters, the LADWP, and various reports, points to one clear conclusion. The city failed to prepare itself water-wise for a disaster of this magnitude. This is a glaring failure of preparedness. Now, you'd think that by the second day of this crisis, the problem would be addressed or resolved. Well, think again, because we have a retard in chief for mayor.
We saw an apartment building engulfed in flames. I saw the fire engine pull up this afternoon, a fire captain have one of his firefighters attach a hose to a hydrant, and that hose didn't fill up, Alex. And I asked the captain, out of every 10 hydrants you attach to today, on average, how many are you getting full water from? He says little to none. And it was at that point that really the whole crew stopped, looked up at this apartment building, and they realized there was nothing they could do.
Infuriating. That's all I can really say at this point. I mean, you can see it right there. They're showing residents are using their own hoses to try to save their homes. That's where the situation has gotten. Anyway, we did much later in the day get a response from the mayor. Finally, hopefully she had some answers.
Right now, if you need help, emergency information, resources, and shelter is available. All of this can be found at URL. Los Angeles, together is how we will get through this.
You know, I was calling her retarded earlier. I don't take that back. That's straight up retarded behavior. She read out URL instead of actually stating the URL as a public service for people who need the help. Like, please, man, you can't make this up. This is Parks and Recs on crack. Anyway, she did provide some answers, and as you will see in a few seconds, they were primarily CYA. Cover your ass.
As I just mentioned, this is an absolutely unprecedented event. It has been many, many years since we've faced this strong fire winds. So the water pressure dropped as a result of the massive need to fight this unprecedented incident. Water remains available in the Palisades through hydrants, but also through water tankers that have been deployed. Claims that the tanks weren't full are false. On Monday evening, all available water tanks were filled before the fire.
Ah, yes, the spin. I love me some spin. Yeah, that's not going to cut it, Chief. We have eyes and ears. And we've seen several accounts that there was no water, that the firefighters literally had to turn around and leave because there was no water. I mean, but you know what? I'll give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe the politician would decide to go to Ghana for vacation while her city is burning down after she cut millions of dollars from the fire department budget of the town that literally burns down all the time. Maybe that politician is telling the truth. I don't know. Let's see. That is a firefighter using a cone to pick up water off the street to try to put out a flame. Yes, there definitely is a lot of water. Sure, Karen. The devastation caused by the wildfires in Los Angeles is more than just a natural disaster. It's a glaring indictment of failed leadership, misplaced priorities, and systemic mismanagement. From Mayor Karen Bass's reckless budget cuts to the Los Angeles Fire Department to the decades-long water mismanagement policies driven by ideological environmentalism, it's clear that California's leaders have failed to prepare for crises of this magnitude. Billions of gallons of water are wasted each year in the name of protecting a small fish, while outdated infrastructure lets rainwater flow uselessly into the ocean. Meanwhile, firefighters on the front lines are left with dry hydrants and insufficient resources, forced to battle blazes with one hand tied behind their backs. At the same time, California funnels money into performative policies and international aid, neglecting its own citizens when they need help the most. So it's time to ask yourself, how long are we willing to accept leaders who fail to prioritize the safety and well-being of their constituents? What does it say about a city that can't provide water for its firefighters, but can send millions to programs that don't deliver results? If your home were at risk, would you feel confident in the leadership of someone who prioritizes photo ops over solutions? How much longer can we allow these patterns of mismanagement to continue before the damage becomes irreversible? These are not just abstract questions. They directly affect the safety, security, and future of every Angeleno. It's time to demand better, because if this is the result of current leadership, what happens when the next disaster strikes? You tell me what you think in the comments down below. Hope you have a terrific day. Peace.